Welcome to a very special episode of Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter.
And I'm an agent of controlled chaos.
Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark, sooty landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Today, we are honored to have two very special guests joining us, Shawn Simons and Alvaro Llanos. In January of 2000, Shawn and Alvaro were severely injured when a fire broke out at their freshman dormitory at Seton Hall University. That fire changed their lives forever. While the physical and emotional scars from that night are enduring, the legacy of their story is something far more powerful. Out of that trauma, Shawn and Alvaro have built years of advocacy focused on improving fire safety on college campuses and helping to protect students across the country. Today they're here to talk about their experience, their journey since that night, and the work they've done to make campuses safer for everyone. Shawn and Alvaro, welcome to Crime to Burn.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
I wanted to start with, make sure we have plenty of time to get to all your advocacy work and what you're doing now, but I wanted to start with a little bit of information from before the fire. So can you tell me, we'll start with you, Shawn, what was your life like as a freshman at Seton Hall? What kinds of things were you up to when you weren't in class?
I always kind of tell people the fire took place on January 19th of 2000, but on January 18th of 2000, I was just a normal college freshman kid. I was taking business courses. Of course, the second semester of our freshman year, I had an internship at a law firm because I thought initially I was going to go into law. But it was a typical, just typical time being on a college campus, going to class, hanging out with friends, going out to New York City to, on our free time. Just an average college typical lifestyle.
And Alvaro, what were you up to when you weren't in class?
Pretty much the same. A normal college student. I actually worked on campus in the computer lab, helping students with having computer issues, and I was studying actually computer science at the time on campus. Remember, most of my routine is going to classes, probably going to the gym for a little bit, hanging out with some friends, and especially the night before the fire, we all sat together and watched a movie before the end of the night.
That was actually leads into my next question, which was, were you two already close friends before the fire, or were you just roommates that sort of passed in the night?
So we were assigned to room together. Alvaro and I did not know each other prior to our start at Seton Hall in September. We just were randomly paired together. I think we had some of the same interests, and I think that's why we were paired together. I always tell people that, I don't think that we had even though Alvaro and I are very different, we have different personalities. They say that opposites attract, and I think it was a perfect combination when it came to them pairing us as roommates.
Alvaro, what was the most annoying thing about being Shawn's roommate?
The most annoying thing, that he was messy. He was definitely messy. Left his room disorganized to the point where sometimes I had to fold his clothes for him, and he'll come back to the room and he'll wonder if his mom was in visiting for a few minutes.
And Shawn, what was the most annoying thing about visiting with Alvaro besides him folding your clothes when you were home?
I'll tell you the truth, there weren't too many annoying things. I love the fact that he was folding my clothes and keeping the room clean. I think, the biggest thing was at the time that Alvaro had a girlfriend, and, so it would be times where I come back to the room and maybe he'd be in the room with his girlfriend because I was trying to bring in my multitude of girlfriends. So
you got to get that schedule down.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you guys remember about the night that the fire started? I know there had been a really big basketball game on campus. There was sort of a celebratory feeling around campus. Were the two of you part of that celebration? Were you big basketball fans? Alvaro, you just mentioned you guys had watched a movie that night. So what was going on that night?
That night, the main focus that I remember is us just hanging out in our room with a couple friends, with my girlfriend at the time, Shawn, and we were actually watching the movie Armageddon. That's what I remember from that night. Everything else was a little vague, even with the partying around campus. For me, what always sticks in my head is watching this great movie, one of my favorite movies, with a couple of good friends.
Yeah, for me, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I had an internship at a law firm, so I didn't get a chance to actually watch the game itself. But by the time I returned from my internship and got back on campus, the game had just ended, and we found out that we had actually beat St. John's at the time. And St. John's was ranked; they were one of the ranked teams in the country, and it was just the whole campus was just electric. People were just like running up and down the hallways. People were partying, drinking, just having a good time like most college campuses do when you beat a rival team or you beat a ranked team. So it was just a electric environment. People were excited. People were just having a good time. And just kind of to the, like Alvaro said, we decided to kind of die down from all the excitement of everything that was going on and just sit down and watch a movie before we went to bed.
One of the things that we talked about in the episode was that there was a lot of false fire alarms at Boland Hall. How often were there false alarms, and what were those like? Like, were they always in the middle of the night?
There were a multitude of false alarms. Sometimes we say that there was at least one a week, but there were times during the course of certain nights where there would be 2 or 3. I remember distinctly at certain times of the semester, like midterms, sometimes on the weekends. A lot of times people went home on the weekends, but there still were a lot of people around, and they would just constantly pull the fire alarms on the weekend. I don't know if people were just getting drunk, if they were fraternity pranks. It definitely rose to a level of complacency because of the number of fire alarms that were pulled and that were not necessarily real emergencies.
So I know when I was in college, there was some overlap between when I was in college and when you guys were in college. We constantly had meetings where we talked about the importance of not pulling fire alarms because of complacency. Was that ever a conversation that people had in your dorm?
For me, I can't remember having a meeting about that aspect, but we did have floor meetings occasionally, and the safety aspect never stuck in my head. I don't even remember speaking about any safety aspect of what we should do if there's a fire, or if not to pull the fire alarm. I know towards the end, because of all the alarms, we did get a message, a memo saying that they were going to find students who were eventually caught on pulling the alarm.
Shawn, when you heard the alarm go off, because I understand from the book that Alvaro actually slept through it and you had to wake him up, how long did you lay there pondering whether or not you were going to get up?
I mean, it was just like probably any other time we heard the fire alarm go off. Like, you hear it go off. I'm a very light sleeper. Not just the alarm going off, but like if people were like playing around in the hallway or making a lot of noise, like I would just kind of wake up and, just kind of listen to the noise. But, so it was the same thing with the alarm. Like the alarm would go off and I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. And as Alvaro stated, prior to the semester starting, we had got like an email or something saying, okay, in order to and the issue was not only just the pulling of alarms, but the time that people would evacuate the building. There were times where the alarm would go off and like 20 minutes later, people would still be trickling out the building. And our building had about 650 students in it. It's a 6th floor building, and it just, I guess they got to the point where they were saying like, this is just taking way too long for people to get out the building. So they tried to implement this fine on us of $100 that if we weren't out the building in a certain amount of time, then we would have to get that $100 fine. So, when I heard it go off, I kind of was like, oh boy, here we go. The night before, it was freezing. Like we had went through a really cold spell in New Jersey, and that's what I was thinking about. I'm like, I do not feel like standing outside in the cold for 15, 20 minutes while they come for yet another false alarm. So I would say the time that I probably spent in the bed was maybe, I would say anywhere between maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and just kind of was like, all right, you know what, let me get up and get Al up and let's get out of here.
So did you smell smoke or sense anything was wrong before you opened your dormitory door?
So no, it was just like any other fire alarm that had went off prior. It just kind of was like, all right, the alarm's going off. You didn't hear anybody screaming. You didn't hear any, didn't smell any smoke. There was no smoke to our knowledge in the room. Remember, this is 4:30 in the morning. It's dark. So it's just kind of like, all right, let's turn the light on and get dressed. But we had no idea of what was on the other side of that door until we opened it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it had to do that we were groggy just from waking up in the middle of the night, that we didn't smell the smoke, but until we opened the door, that's when we realized there was actually something tragic going on in this building.
So Shawn, in the book, After the Fire, which is the story of both you and Alvaro's injury and recovery, you mentioned that you actually turned toward the elevator when you came out of the room. And I wanted to ask, obviously you've had multiple fire alarms. You knew they needed to go toward the stairs. So was there a stairwell near the elevator, or was this just muscle memory? We just have to get out. Like, what was happening there?
Our room was about 4 doors down from where the lounge was, and in the lounge is where the elevators were. We were on the 3rd floor. So most of the times when we left and came out the building, we would use the elevators to come up and down to the 3rd floor. So whenever we had the fire alarms, of course, we couldn't use the elevators, but there was a staircase that was kind of right across from where the elevators were that we would always go out of, because that was the way to go out to the main entrance. Now, because of the way that our dorm was kind of set up, you had to come in through security in order to get into the building. So the security desk kind of was symmetrical to where the elevators were. So even, like I said, anytime we had a fire alarm or anytime we were leaving the building, we always went that way to go out the main door. In hindsight, yes, there was an emergency exit door that was closer to where our room was, that if we would have went out of our room and made a left instead of made the right, there could have been another stairwell that we could have gone out of. But like you said, muscle memory of always going the same way all the time, we just ended up going the way that we went out the building all the time.
And I think that's really important for people to understand, because I think reading the book or listening to the documentary, which is so powerful, I think a lot of people question that decision. Like, why wouldn't you go to the emergency exit? And I think understanding that this is the way that you normally went out during all these false alarms and that muscle memory kicks in is important. Plus, it does not take long for carbon monoxide exposure and toxic fire byproduct exposure to start impacting your decision-making ability. People don't realize how fast you can become hypoxic. And even if you had the muscle memory of going toward the other exit from all those false alarms, there's still a chance you could have just reverted to the way that you normally go in and out. And that's why we can't just focus on training people what to do in a fire alarm. We also have to focus on risk reduction, because there's always a chance that because of exposure, our decision-making faculties are going to be impacted in these incidents.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's one of those situations where it starts from a young age. A lot of times when you have fire alarms in schools and stuff like that, it's kind of like, all right, everybody go the same way all the time. And then it just leads into adulthood where, if you go a certain way all the time, your head is, it's just like going to a mall. You always park in the same kind of area so you know where your car is. So if there's an emergency, guess what? You really only know how to go that way to get out the mall. A lot of it starts with the training aspect, I think, from a younger age. And as mentioned earlier, maybe someone had taught us to maybe go to our nearest exit, but we didn't probably this. We were 18 years old. We thought we were invincible and nothing would ever happen to us. So why did we need to listen to that information?
I totally understand. Now, I want to talk about what your experiences were individually when you realized there was actually a fire. So I'm going to start with you, Shawn. You talked about you crawled down the hall and the floor tiles were actually melting to your hands, and you ended up in the room of another student. When you ended up in that room of another student, in the book, you specifically said that you looked out the window. What was your thought process there? I know there were students that jumped out of windows, and you didn't. You went back into the hallway that had been burning you to get out. So tell me what happened there.
Just being disoriented at the time, what I actually did was I crawled through the lounge that was on fire, not knowing that the fire was there. I always like to tell people, if you've never ever experienced being in a fire, it's nothing like how it looks on TV. TV, they make it very theatrical for you. There's this theater smoke that's clear that you can see what people are doing, but it was nothing that night. It was literally like we had a blindfold on trying to find our way out of a building that we had gone in and out of over 150 times. So I was trying to get to the stairwell that was by the elevators, but I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see the exit signs, couldn't see anything. And I just kept crawling, not realizing that I had actually crawled past the exit stairwell and just kept crawling. And finally, I was able to get into that room where, and it's kind of ironic because our doors were sort of the spring closed doors. Like once you opened them, they would automatically spring closed. And so it was ironic that someone's door was open, unless you block it or the door was broken. So I'm not sure what the case was in this situation, but there was a door that was open because I was able to see sort of like the moonlight from outside. And when I crawled into that room, I stood up and I just kind of went to the window to get some fresh air and to yell for help. And there was just no one there. So I didn't know at that point in time if someone had just jumped out the window, if they had already evacuated. I'm not sure, where they were, but I just kind of had to sit on the floor and gather myself and kind of regroup and say, okay, I need to get out of here. And I know the direction that I came from in the hallway. I'm not going back that way because I know the fire was close to that direction. So just kind of, okay, let me get back on my hands and knees and go the opposite direction. And literally I crawled from one end of our hallway down to the other end of the hallway where the stairwell and the emergency exit was.
And Alvaro, the book tells us a lot about what Shawn experienced once he crawled out of the room, but we don't get to hear a lot of your firsthand experience of what happened when you were evacuating. I know the two of you got separated at some point. Do you remember that? Do you remember what was going through your mind or how you got to the stairway?
Yes, I remember pretty much everything that happened that night. I remember leaving the room, heading towards the elevators, toward the staircase. Just felt prisoner's routine. It was just instinct making that right and going towards that way. And the further we went, the hotter the hallway became, to the point, for me, it got so intense, I had to stop and just gather myself. And so I decided to turn back. And as I turned back, I ended up running into a brick wall, and I was confused. I was scared. I was thinking about my family. I'm just scared for my life. Just, didn't know what I was going to do. And finally, I became brave enough to, I'm going to keep pushing forward to figure out how to get out of this building. But I was just wanted to go the same way that we were so used to, stubborn, wanted to go the same way that we always go. And I was like, okay, I know there's an exit nearby, 2 doors down. So I felt my way filling the hallway. But the further I went, it just got so much intense to the point that I felt my hair burning, where I had to pat my head real quick and just try to stay furthest away from the fire. I didn't know where the fire was, but I felt the heat and tried to stay closest to the wall on the left side and just felt the wall until I found the door to the exit. And when I opened the door, I saw a fireball from the corner of my eye hit my back and lit me on fire, and I fell into the staircase. And the door closed behind me, and there was 2 RAs that was coming down the stairs, and they helped me remove the fire.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. There were 2 what?
There was 2 RAs coming down the stairs.
Resident advisors.
The resident assistants were coming down the stairs, and they helped me remove the fire at that moment.
And your jacket actually caught fire, is that correct?
Yes, my jacket caught on fire. I don't remember what type of jacket I had on that day, but it was something that just lit up so quick. And you start thinking about, I should have grabbed another jacket that was a better material, thinking back what you could have done. Yeah, that it just lit up like a Christmas tree, and I'm thankful that there was 2 people there to help me to remove the fire.
I am too. Alvaro, you encountered those 2 resident advisors on the stairs that helped you. But Shawn, did you encounter anyone on your floor as you were trying to get to the stairs or when you were going down the stairs?
In a building of 650 people, you think I would have bumped into a single soul at some point in time. It just felt like it was myself in the hallway. Like I knew Alvaro was behind me, and I thought that he was behind me until I got into that room. But it was almost like it was just me in the whole building by myself, almost like a dream or a nightmare where you're the only person in a burning building, in a sense. And there were no screams, there were no, and I don't know if this was just my body in shock. I don't know if just the adrenaline pumping, I just didn't hear those sounds. But I never ran into anybody. I never heard anybody. It wasn't until I actually made it to the emergency exit on the end of the hallway that when I got to the door, there was a person who was kind of standing there, trying to direct people to get out. But I had the stretch of the hallway from where I crawled, never ever saw anybody, never heard anyone, which is crazy.
Now, when I was reading the book, one thing that really grabbed my attention was they said at one point you were in the back of a police car trying to get out. What happened? How did you end up in a police car?
Yeah, so when I got to the stairwell and I stood up, once again, I think because my body was in shock and I had all this adrenaline pumping through my body, I hadn't realized that I was burned. I just thought that, yes, I know there was a fire because I felt the heat, But unlike Alvaro's experience, because of the fact that none of my clothing had caught on fire, and because of the fact that there was so much soot on me, I couldn't, I didn't feel any pain. Wasn't able to look at my hands to see that there was anything wrong. So when I stood up, I walked down the 3 flights of stairs down to where we had a campus ministry sort of section in the building. So that's where that exit led to. And I walked outside, and like, once again, that's, like I said, it was really, really cold that night. And in the process of me crawling through the hallway, because of the heat being so hot, I actually took off my jacket. It was that hot that I ended up taking off my jacket. So when I got outside, I was freezing. Also not realizing that I had been burned. So now my exposed burns are, exposed to the cold air outside. So I just was like, all right, I'm not standing outside waiting for people to tell us we can go back in the building. I'm just going to go over to the cafeteria, which was right across the way from where our bowling hall was. So I went into the cafeteria, and as I walked in, I was going in to sit down at one of the tables, and somebody said, I think you need some medical attention. And I'm like, for what? So, I listened to him, and I turned back around and I walked back outside. And at that point in time, there were no EMTs, there were no fire trucks on campus at the time. But there was a police officer who had already been there. And someone said, hey, this guy needs some medical attention. And the police officer, he grabbed me and he said, okay, well, sit in the back of my car until, I can get the EMTs there. But he put me in the back of his car. And then I guess he went towards the building to try to help people, other students get out. And my mind was just like going crazy, because like now I feel like I'm trapped in the back of this car. I can't open doors. Like, what the hell is going on here? And I just started panicking, and I'm like, people are walking by. I'm like kicking at the windows, trying to get out the back of the car. Like I went frantic.
I can't imagine. Obviously, you have to be in shock at that moment, and being put in the back of a police car must have been so disorienting.
Yes.
The two of you were both taken to the hospital. You were at the same hospital, and you were both in the burn unit. Alvaro, you were in a coma a lot longer than Shawn was. But what is the first thing that each of you remember about waking up in the ICU?
For me, after the 3 months, when you wake up, you're still confused. You're still heavily medicated. You're not sure what's going on. You're not sure, who are the people that are helping you at the time. And for me, I just saw a lot of blurry faces, especially I wear glasses, so I didn't have my glasses. That made it even more difficult trying to figure out, who was there to help me. And you're confused for a while until they start, helping you put the puzzle together and helping you realize that that you was injured in a fire. And then little by little, our parents started to come in, and they explained the process as well.
And Shawn, what was the first thing you remember?
Yeah, so it's the same thing, like, being in the coma. When you wake up out of it, you just think it's the next day, not realizing that we had been in it for so long. I mean, in my situation, I was in it for about 2 weeks, and just thinking that it was, in a sense, January 20th, and literally it was in February when I woke up and came out the coma. But the same thing, when they're weaning you out of the coma and they're weaning you off the medication, you're very confused. You don't know what's going on. Neither one of us, because of them having to incubate us, we weren't able to talk. So it was like we couldn't even ask questions. So it's just very puzzling. I think at that point in time, I started to put the puzzle together and say, okay, I know it definitely was a fire, but you didn't know the severity of how bad it was until we were able to finally ask some questions and figure out how bad it was.
And once you woke up and were able to communicate, one of your earliest questions and concerns was, how is Alvaro doing? And I know that there are some efforts from your family to try to protect you from the additional, emotional trauma of understanding how severely Alvaro was burned. How did that make you feel, knowing that you mentioned in the book you knew that they were sort of hiding Alvaro's, the severity of Alvaro's situation from you? How did that make you feel? Did that give you more anxiety, or did you understand that they were trying to protect you? Like, what were you thinking?
Well, at the time, of course not. At the time you're thinking like, okay, this must be really, really bad if they don't want to give me an exact update on, how Alvaro's doing. They're just saying, okay, he was hurt, but he's okay. He's in they said that he was 2 rooms down from me, and that he was okay. He was, alive and getting better. But it wasn't until I was able to really get the full scope of how badly burned he was. And this was later on that I was able to, get this information kind of errantly, but I was able to get the scope of how bad it was for him compared to how bad it was, in my situation. For me, it was more of an issue. Yeah, I had the burns, but they were more afraid of because of the time that I had been in the hallway with the smoke inhalation. So that was more of my concern, or more of the doctor's concern, or my recovery was the aspect of getting my lungs back to the where they should be and things of that nature. I had no idea at the time that Alvaro, had burns on over 60% of his body, and that his organs were shutting down and all of these things were going on with him until, I was able to find out probably about a week after I woke up out of the coma.
And you mentioned in the book that as you were going down the hall to get treatment to the room where they treated your wounds every day, that you would peek in and look at him. And that was sort of like your clue that things were a lot worse for him.
So when we would go to what's called the tank room, and that's the room where you go to get your dressings changed, and they go to, give you your daily, shower and things like that. They would push us on a stretcher into this room, and they would push us past the nurses station. And on the nurses station, up on the wall, they had like a lineup of everybody's last name and what room they were in. So I was able to see one day, I saw Alvaro's last name, which is Llanos. I saw Llanos on the board, and I believe he was in room 4, and I was in room 2. So, when they would push me by, I would kind of look up at the room, and I would look in, and I couldn't necessarily see him, but I knew that there was a person laying in the bed, but I would see people who I would later find out were his parents and his family who were visiting him, just kind of standing around the bed. And I realized at that point in time, well, I'm being pushed around, I can see things, but it doesn't look like it's the same for him. So I kind of, was able to add 2 and 2 together and realize that it was a lot worse than what my parents or what the other nurses and stuff were leading on.
You often hear anecdotal stories of people that were in comas that can remember things that people said or did in the room around them. Do either of you have any memories like that from when you were in a coma?
For me personally, yeah, you hear those stories where families talk to them, they hear them and the person moves. For me, for those 3 months, I had no clue what was going on in the real world. My family's friends were coming to visit me. My family was playing music for me every day, and I had no clue. I was in a dream state that whole time, those 3 months, and it felt like I was stuck on the Seton Hall campus, and I was in my residence hall. And when I walked down from my room from the 3rd floor, I walked down to the 1st floor, and it became the hospital. So I guess I had an idea I was injured, but the whole time I was walking around campus in my dream, stuck on campus for that whole time. And then when I woke up, it felt like the next day. I didn't realize those 3 months had passed.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Yeah, so being in a coma is, and I always tell people, because of being burned, they put us on some good shit. The medication kind of makes you, I don't want to say hallucinate, but it makes us have some funky dreams. And I do recall being in the coma, like Alvaro said, like people would come and speak to us and talk to us, but we don't remember that aspect of it. But the thing that I do remember, or the thing that I thought I did remember, was that I knew that there was a fire. I knew that I had been hurt somewhat, but not, like I said, to the extent of what I was. That it was that I had just pretty much went to the hospital, and this is my dream. This is like, and we'll later find out this is the medication that's making me making this dream in a coma. But that they had released me from the hospital, and that they were bringing me back to campus in an ambulance, just to kind of like, bring me back and say, But when I got to the campus, when we pulled through the main gates, there were like cheerleaders outside cheering, like, "Go, Shawn, welcome back." And when I got out the ambulance, as I was walking, I guess maybe to my dorm, somebody handed me a box, and the box had a key in it. And it was a key to a brand new Ford Mustang. And I was just so excited. I'm like, oh my God, they got me a Mustang. So when I woke up out the coma and I was able to finally start talking, I asked my mom, I said, "Where's the Mustang?" And she was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And I'm like, "The Mustang, like, where is the Mustang?" And they had no idea until I explained to them.
That's so funny. I had major liver surgery years and years ago. They removed the entire left lobe of my liver, And all I remember from ICU, I remember flashes from ICU, but one of the things I remember is my mom storming into my room at like 2 a.m. because she wasn't allowed to stay in there. She stayed in the waiting room, and there she was allowed to come in when I was awake. So she stormed into my room and disconnected the phone and walked out with it. Apparently, I had called my boss at 2 in the morning and asked him if he could go pick up the puppies from the airport because I wasn't going to make it. I have no recollection of this at all. All I remember is my mom walking in and stealing my phone, and I'm like, where are you going with my phone? So
That's
I
hilarious.
Understand what it's like to be on the good shit. As you're recovering from these injuries, what were you thinking the rest of your life looks like? Because you had gone to bed as college students with your whole life ahead of you. Did you feel like your life was changing, or did you feel like, oh, as soon as I heal from these injuries, I'm going back to school, I'm going to graduate, I'm just going to continue life as it was?
In the beginning, you don't know what to expect. Especially, in the beginning, for me personally, I didn't realize how injured I was until you start going through the physical therapy process. So now you're waking up, you're like, okay, they're going to take care of me. And especially I saw Shawn up and going. So I was like, okay, so he's up and going, walking around. It's going to be the same format for myself. I'm going to be up and walking around soon as well. But it was just a longer process until it started to explain to me, okay, my route's going to be much longer. And when you're going through the physical therapy process, when they're trying to get you up little by little, you start taking steps to learn how to walk again. And then I started realizing how much of a struggle this was going to be.
And you actually spent part of your recovery in the same rehabilitation hospital where Christopher Reeve rehabilitated after his spinal cord injury, correct?
Yes, I did. When I was there, and it was the rehabilitation in West Orange. That was West Orange? Yeah, I think it was West Orange. Kessler and West Orange. They told me the whole spiel, the history about Christopher Reeve being the Superman. So, and they were awesome there. They did a great job helping me get back on my feet.
So, Shawn, the same question for you. Did you feel like you were just going to hop back into your regular life, or did you feel like you had this shift in your future plans?
Yeah, you know what? I think that I knew because of the severity of the injury, as far as like, especially with my hands, they thought at some point in time that they were going to have to amputate 4 of my fingers because they were so severely burned that going through the therapy process, like it just almost was like nothing was working for those 4 digits. So it was one of those things where I'm like, oh my God, what is my life going to be like without 4 fingers? And will I have a normal life? And at that point in time, I had, already got the skin grafting. So you're not sure how that's going to heal, if it's going to look like that, So all of these things are kind of racing through your mind at that time, especially because having to get the skin grafting, it's a very long process of recovery. So there's a lot of occupational therapy, learning how to do things over simple things that you've been accustomed to doing for, at that point in our lives, 18 years, simple things like holding a fork or holding a toothbrush to brush your teeth. Now you have to rely on other people to help you do those things. And it was frustrating. It was scary because you didn't know at that time how much work had to be put into getting those normal features back. And that was, to me, probably the scariest part. But then it also was explained to us, and the one thing I have to give a lot of credit to was there were instances where we would have prior burn survivors who would come and talk to us and say, look, I know the process that you're going through. It seems tough right now, but with the right amount of therapy and the right amount of dedication to, trying to get these things back, you can get back your normal life. So I think that was a optimistic turning point to be able to hear that from other burn survivors saying, hey, look, you have to put the work in. It's not just going to happen overnight. This is a very slow process, but if you're diligent with it, then you can definitely get, most of your functions back. And I think once I was able to comprehend that, I was able to kind of deliver that to Alvaro as well, because of not because of the fact that mines were just limited to the scarring on my hands. For Alvaro, it was on 60% of his body, from his head down to his torso. So there were a lot more therapies that he had to do that, I wanted him to be an encouragement to him.
In the book, you talk about the first time that the two of you actually went to support other burn survivors. So tell me about that and how that changed your path and your recovery.
Well, definitely for us, that was a big part, just giving back and paying it forward, because other burn survivors had done it for us. And sometimes when you're going through the process, you're in a very emotional state where you want to give up, and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But knowing there were other people that have gone along this road in the past, and you see where they're back living a normal life and productive, that inspired us. So we wanted to do the same, inspire others and help others to achieve their goals, to get them back to a normal life.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the legal aspects around the fire. And then I want to spend some time on your advocacy work, because that's what's really the legacy of this fire. But when did you first find out that this fire may not have been an accident?
Oh, for me, I would say maybe about a week after coming out of the coma. I was able to, watch TV, and this was still a very hot topic at the time, because this was just big headline news for here, New Jersey, New York metro area. And they would sporadically just kind of flash people that, these two guys that they thought were the possible arsonists of the fire. And the thing that registered for me was that I said, wow, I know these guys, like they lived across the hall from us. So it was one of those situations where it was just kind of like, okay, now, like, why did they do this? Why, and not at that time, like, you're still trying to recover, you're trying to piece your life back together. But now you have this whole other aspect of it, like, okay, what the hell really happened?
I didn't realize they lived across the hall from you.
Yes, they lived directly across the hall from us. We weren't necessarily friends with them because of the fact that they were pledging for a fraternity. They spent a lot of time away in the frat house for the fraternity that they were pledging for, but they were known actually as the Beavis and Butthead of our floor. Like, they would constantly be written up for, playing loud music after quiet time, or playing basketball or frisbee in the hallway, things like that. So they weren't necessarily liked by a lot of people we didn't really have an interaction with them that often.
They were douchebags.
Definitely. The most interaction we had with them was one time they asked to borrow a broom, but that's about it.
They asked to borrow a broom. There you go. When they were arrested, how did the two of you figure out that they were arrested? How'd you find out?
We knew that they were going to get arrested because the investigators were excellent throughout the whole process. They would always kind of give us a update on what was going on. So they did contact us prior to them going to arrest them, and just let them know, hey, look, this is the next move that we're going to do. We have enough evidence to finally move forward with it. So we kind of knew before, of course, the media knew and everything. I guess before they even knew, or maybe their lawyers knew. So that's kind of how we found out. But then, once it broke out in the media, it was just, I think it was a relief for a lot of people that they had actually finally moved forward, the process of saying, okay, these are the two guys who did it, and now let's take them to trial.
Yeah, so it was relief for those families that lost their loved ones in that fire. I can't imagine, as being a parent now, what those parents went through, losing their son in that fire. And even us being in the leading up to the courtroom, it was so emotional being in the courtroom, hearing those families go up there and read their statements in front of the judge was heartbreaking.
And you went to the sentencing hearing, Alvaro. So tell me what that experience was like for you.
It was very intense. There was two sides in the courtroom. The side of the families of the two guys that started the fire, and the families of the victims. And their side seemed like the parents made it seem like both sides were fighting. You could see like bickering a little bit. You could see from a distance, even though I was in the front, you could see certain bickering from side to side. And it was very intense. It made it seem like the family of the two guys started fire, like they were the victims. And it was just very emotional, and seeing the parents and the siblings of our fellow classmates that lost their lives in the fire, hearing them read their statement broke me down emotionally to the point where I couldn't read my statement. And to the point where my ex-wife had to try to read my statement. She broke down crying, and then the prosecutor had to actually finish my statement for me.
That was a really emotional part of the book when I read it. But Shawn, you didn't go to the sentencing hearing. So what was behind your decision not to attend?
I just think at that point in time, I wasn't in a healing space where I wanted to be in the same environment, the same room as them. I had a lot of hate towards those two guys. I tell people all the time that I don't think their intent that night was to kill three people or to hurt us or to send our campus into this chaos. I think they got drunk. They made a really, really piss poor decision, and this was the result of it. But I always wish they would have come forward in the beginning and just say, "Look, we're sorry. We didn't mean for this to happen. What happens from here?" And they didn't do that. They manipulated the investigation with all kinds of things. And I always say I don't think that Alvaro and I necessarily needed an apology. Our parents had a chance to come to the hospital to at least see if we were going to make it. There were three families who got that phone call that early morning that said they had to come identify their children's bodies. They deserved that apology, and they never gave that. And to me, I had a lot of hate towards them that I didn't even want to be in the same room with them because I don't know how I would have reacted. I could have possibly gotten myself in trouble for what I would have tried to do to them.
I understand. Do you think that you've been able to forgive them, or is that not on the priority list anymore?
As age comes and a little bit of wisdom comes, you learn in life that you have to kind of move on and let go of things. I hated them for a long time. I would say I really had hate for them for almost 10 years after the fire. And I remember 10 years because of the fact of having a conversation with my mother as we were approaching one of the anniversaries of the fire. And she said, "Well, Shawn, you have to learn how to let go and move on." She says, she said, and I said to her, I said, "Well, it's difficult to just say it. And, we all say we can do something, but you have to actually have it in you to do it." And I said, when I wake up every morning, I have to look at these scars on my hands. I have the memories of everything I've been through because of what these two guys did to us. And my mother simply said to me, she says, "You have all this hate directed towards those two guys, but guess what? They're not here for you to tell them that you hate them." She said they're off living their life, probably not thinking about you 1 second of the day. She said the only person that you're hurting with all that hate in your heart is yourself. And when she said it to me like that, it made all the sense in the world. A lot of times in life, people say, "Oh, we hate a person, we can't stand the person." And 9 times out of 10, that person's not thinking about you. They're having a great day and you're the one who's struggling. So when I was able to really, truly grasp that theory and be able to let it go and say, at the end of the day, I can't change what they did. I can't change how they feel, but I can change how I feel. And once I was able to do that, honestly, my life became a lot more better because I wasn't holding on to all that negative energy.
What about you, Alvaro? Have you been able to forgive them? Have you tried to forgive them?
Yes, for me, forgiveness came early on. I guess not realizing too much what was going on with the case, after waking up 3 months after the coma. I decided to focus all my energy towards myself. To this day, I don't know which name goes to which person. That's one of the guys that started the fire. Never cared for them. I just wanted to focus on myself and all my energy to my recovery process. And I think it would have been more difficult for me to recover if I would have carried that hate towards them. So I decided to not allow them to rent free in my head and forgive them. And but it was a process. Even though my statement prior that I wrote for the judge, maybe there was some hatred in there. It's just hatred to let them realize, even though I forgave them, how I felt through my recovery process, dealing with scars, dealing with the recovery, the struggles that my family and we had to deal with.
So, Shawn, the first time I heard you speak at a conference, you said something that was so profound that I still remember it today. You said, "It's not that I'm glad that the fire happened, but I'm thankful for what it's turned into." So tell us about what this fire has turned into for you guys.
So a lot of people can look at this and over the years, people say, "I'm so sorry for what you had to go through and, just the pain that you had to endure." And I'm a strong believer that I think everything happens for a reason. If this fire didn't happen to us at Seton Hall, maybe it would have happened on another college campus across this country, or maybe not 3 people would have died, maybe 30 people could have died. The effects of the Seton Hall fire happening changed the perspective of universities and colleges across the country to say, okay, what are we doing on our campuses to make things a lot safer? And I think that's where Alvaro and I decided to start doing our motivational speaking, going to college campuses, to high schools, talking to young adults who are possibly thinking about going to live on a college campus, to saying, look, your safety matters. And fire safety is something that I think a lot of times people just take for granted. There were a lot of things that we did wrong the night of the fire that we feel like if we can teach someone before they're put into that situation and say, hey, look for your multiple exits, know where your nearest exit is, get out the building in a timely fashion, don't cover up your smoke detector so you can smoke in your room. Like all of these different things now that we've actually gone through, and other cases that we've been able to hear about and apply to our presentation. Now we get that opportunity to kind of give back and show young adults like, hey, we were just like you. We thought we were invincible, that nothing could happen to us, and that, you know, we were going into a safe environment. And in most cases, they are in safe environments, but there's always that slight chance that, you know, there's going to be some knucklehead that does something that affects you, or there's going to be a cooking fire or electrical fire. Like there's so many different ways that fires could have happened and had the same effect. So now we have the opportunity to share our story from a very unique perspective. There are very few people who can say that they actually survived the fire on their college campus, and we are in that very small group of individuals. And now we have that opportunity to go and share our story, and it's something that's amazing because we can use that to, just like I said, bring awareness to people who never thought that it would happen to them, like we thought it would never happen to us.
I understand. So the two of you do now work as motivational speakers, and you do share your story and your advocacy for campus fire safety with everyone. Tell us how people can find you. Tell us what they can do in order to either bring you on or to be able to share your mission.
Yeah, so our major focus, and I guess because this happened to us when we were 18 years old, college freshmen, our major focus and target audience are young adults. So either, you know, getting ready to graduate from high school, getting ready to go off to college, or those already on a college campus. Though we say that our program is a fire safety program, we always try to tell people that it's way bigger than just fire safety. It's about overcoming adversity. It's about perseverance. It's about learning how to be comfortable in your own skin, especially nowadays where there's so many issues with young adults with their mental health issues. Like we want to be able to tell people, hey, look, we've gone through a fire, we have these scars, but we're back just as if nothing happened. And we're trying to show people that, yes, you can go through adversity in life. You can have a tragic moment in your life, but you can also recover from it. You can also become stronger because of it. So that's our goal, you know, is trying to get around and get to as many high schools, as many colleges to share our story, but also just to even people in, you know, different realms of safety. I mean, we love going to speak to firefighters. We love going to speak to fire safety engineers. You know, we love speaking to anyone where this story has a relevancy. People have said, you know, we didn't even know until we've gone and shared our story at certain places, the impact that it's had on people. When people say, you know, just hearing our stories are inspiration. So, you know, like I said, we do want to have that educational component to it, but we always want people to be inspired and motivated that, you know, you can go through any type of adversity in life and you can come through it and be as strong as you were prior to it happening.
It's so powerful. And I can honestly attest to the fact that having seen your presentation when you do come and speak, that it is very powerful and it's very motivating. What do you want either parents of incoming freshmen or incoming freshmen to take away from your experience? What's the most important lesson, do you think?
Just to have that awareness. You know, hopefully the information we give them, they'll never have to use it ever in their life. But just to have that awareness, because the last thing we're thinking at, especially at a young age, 18, 17, is about our safety. And just to think about it, just, you know, we're putting that seed in their brains to think about their safety just a little bit more, because anything can happen at any moment. And we were given a second chance at life to share our testimonies to help others, inspire others, and that's our goal.
And is there anything that you think that people get wrong about this fire when it's talked about?
I don't know if there's anything that people get wrong. I just think that a lot of times, and unfortunately, as we get further and further away from the fire, you know, it's been 26 years. A lot of times, sometimes we get the pushback from, you know, maybe schools that say, well, why is this a relevant topic for our kids? And I say, well, it doesn't matter how long ago it happened. These are still issues that happen on college campuses where there may not be as many prank fire alarms as we had, you know, when we went to school. There's still a high level of complacency amongst young adults who when they hear a fire alarm go off, they just automatically assume it's not a real emergency. And we always tell people our program is way bigger than just fire safety. It's about safety in general. It's about, there could be a shooting, there could be a fight, somebody spraying mace. There can be a number of different emergency situations where you apply some of the same things that we talk about during our presentation that you can apply to, that emergency situation. So, we always tell people, look, 18-year-olds are going to always be 18-year-olds. They're always going to think that nothing's going to ever happen to them. So yes, this story happened 26 years ago, but it's still relevant. It's still relevant to what, how people feel and when it comes to their safety. So that's why we want to continue to get that message out to as many people as possible.
And how did the book and the documentary come about?
The book and the documentary came about. There was a photographer and a writer that followed us for 9 months during our recovery process. And during those 9 months, they were asking intimate questions, how we were feeling, what we were going through, taking pictures, and that ended up becoming a 7-day series on the front page of the Star Ledger newspaper. And it was a big success. And from there was a book company that reached out and knew about everything that we went through, and they wanted to do a book, but the story wasn't finished yet because at the time they reached out, the two guys that started the fire haven't went to trial yet, weren't convicted, so we couldn't finish the book until the two gentlemen were convicted and went to trial.
You call them gentlemen, that sounds like forgiveness.
Definitely, and I have forgiveness in my heart for them. And sometimes the students get upset with me because I call them gentlemen because they're so angry watching the documentary and they're frustrated with the two guys that started the fire.
Where did that come from, the strength to forgive people like that? Where did that come from?
For me personally, the only one I could give credit to is God. He put it in my heart to let go and forgive.
Yeah, God was still working on me at the time, so I'm a work in progress.
I think we're all always a work in progress on something.
But to kind of finish what Alvaro was saying, so once the book was finally written and after the trial, the book came out, I believe, in 2008 or 2009. We got a phone call from a filmmaker from California who said that he was walking in the local Barnes & Noble just trying to find books of inspiration. He picked up our book and he said he liked the cover of it, and he just kind of read the sleeve. He was like, okay, let me take this home. And that was the first book. He had picked 3 books up that day, and that was the first book that he read. And he said he did not go to sleep until he finished reading the book. He said he was so inspired by our story that 2 days later, he contacted our publishing company and said, I need to talk to these guys because I want to do a film on them. So, we talked to him. He ended up flying out at the 10-year anniversary of the fire. He came, we met him at Seton Hall at the memorial mass that they had at Seton on the campus. And what he started doing was he filmed from there and then he just kind of went backwards. But because of the number of photos and content that was already created from the Star Ledger newspaper, he had thousands of still images that he was able to use to put into the documentary. So as he was comprising the story and getting interviews from our parents and from people from the burn unit and people from the school, he was able to drop those pictures in, those still photography pictures in, to kind of help tell the story. So it ended up being a very beautiful depiction of what we had gone through, as if someone had been there with a video camera taping us the whole time, but it wasn't. It was actually was the still photography to help develop the story. And it just became an amazing piece that we're very proud of, and we're very proud to be able to share with so many people.
And what I want people to recognize is that the documentary and the book, they talk about the fire because the fire was obviously the precipitating event, but I feel like the story that you're telling is really the story of surviving and the story of, resilience and helping people understand what it's like to go through something life-changing like this. Not even necessarily just burn patients, but anyone that has a catastrophic life-changing event. I think that if there's people out there that are in the early stages of that kind of injury or event in their life, hearing your story could definitely be an inspiration to give them the strength to see that there is beauty on the other side of it, and that they can find the strength to get through this. It's a very powerful documentary. Obviously, on Crime to Burn, we cover a lot of the forensics of fire and things like that. I tried really hard to relay the resilience aspect but without retelling your story. So even if you've heard our series on the fire, reading this book, watching the documentary, you'll still get something out of it.
So I like to end every one of our presentations with a quote that I found online. And the quote is, "I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around me." And that, to me, is something that, everybody in life is not going to necessarily go through a physical fire, but everybody in life is going to go through some type of adversity, some type of obstacle, some type of challenge in their life, whether it's a bad car accident, the death of a loved one, a sickness, an illness. We always say we pray nobody has to experience going through a fire. But Alvaro and I know that if we survive that fire, especially as 18-year-old college students, when you're in you're in the pinnacle of your life, and then all of a sudden it comes to almost to an end. We always tell people, like, look, you can survive anything that you go through as long as you have a couple of the factors that you help you persevere, which is like determination, having a little bit of hope. Alvaro and I are big faith-based people. Having faith. All of those things are things that should be able to carry you through any type of tragedy, any type of adversity that you go through in life. So, like I said, we just want to be an inspiration to people, not just to burn survivors, but to people in general, that every day is not going to be perfect. Everything is not going to go the way that you had planned. Like, we never thought in a million years we would go to college and then something like this would happen to us, but it happened. And we were able to survive it. And now we're, I always say we're stronger people now than what we probably would have been if this didn't happen to us.
That is definitely true. Now I have one question, is sort of rewinding a little bit because I wanted to get to your advocacy work and make sure we had time for that. But Shawn, when you went back to class at Seton Hall University, you had a meeting with an advisor when you were registering for classes. And you mentioned that you sort of felt like they were like anxious to get you out of the office, and that their speech with you was really guarded, and they were sort of in like a CYA or cover your ass mode. So what would you say to organizations where there's been something that could potentially result in a legal case or legal liabilities or civil liabilities? What would you say in how they should be dealing with victims?
So let me go on record to say this. We've never blamed Seton Hall for this happening to us. Seton Hall didn't start the fire. Those two guys started the fire. And that was something that we wanted to, definitely express to as many people as possible. But the thing that I always have to tell people, and especially when we talk to our audience, is at the end of the day, Seton Hall is a business. It's an institution that relies on tuition money to come in to, keep it functioning. This was a PR nightmare for Seton Hall University. No one sends their child off to college for them not to come home. You send them there to get their education, to make connections, to have fun, all of the things that the typical college experience is supposed to be. They had to be protective. And when you're going through it, of course, you feel as if, maybe they're not being as, they being a little bit guarded, because like I said, they have to kind of, protect themselves as well. There were times where I did feel as if, it was like, okay, let's keep him, we want to welcome him back on campus. We want him to be here and feel comfortable, but also we don't want it to be, a situation where it's bad PR for us too. And but like I said, we never really had any animosity towards Seton Hall because of it. I think I am more thankful of the sense of community that we receive from the people on campus. Like I remember actually leaving that meeting from speaking to one of my advisors and like walking through campus, going to class or something, and a group of kids and remember, we were freshmen when this happened, so it wasn't like we knew a lot of people on campus at the time. But I remember a group of kids stopping me saying, "Hey, you're one of the guys that was burned in the fire, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Hey, can we give you a hug? We just want to say, we've been praying for you. We're excited to see you back on campus." And to me, that really made me feel more comfortable with being there. And I knew that was the right decision for me to come back to Seton Hall. A lot of times we get the question, well, why did you just not transfer? Why didn't you just go to another school? How could you go back to a place where you almost lost your life? And I always say, I think if I would have went to another school and had to start over again, it would have been even more difficult. The thing about going back to Seton Hall was everybody knew us. Everybody knew our story. I didn't have to explain it to anybody. But if I would have decided to transfer and go to another college, then especially as a burn survivor, you always feel as if people are staring at you and they're judging you because of your scars. And I didn't necessarily feel that way on Seton Hall's campus. Like I remember going into one of my classes, and it was a class with most of the basketball team, and like they just embraced me, like, you know, like, hey, you're part of us now, like, you know. And to me, that made me feel so good, because I know if I went to another school, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So yeah, I always say, you know, Seton Hall had to, administrative wise, they had to be kind of guarded. And even at that time, they didn't know if there were going to be lawsuits filed or things of that nature. So, you know, I get it from the PR perspective. But like I said, we never had any ill will towards the school.
So what I'm hearing from you is that for organizations that face, you know, a PR nightmare related to like injuries or illnesses or things like that, that what's really important to the survivors is the sense of community that they can get. So maybe promoting things like support groups and things like that might be a beneficial way to really cultivate that sense of community and allow people to process together.
Yeah, so like I said, as burn survivors, we now have that opportunity to try to help other burn survivors. It's a very small community, but it's a strong community where talking to each other, I think, helps more than necessarily even talking to a therapist. You know, a lot of times when we were in the burn unit, we would sit down with a therapist, and I always kind of say, you know, nothing against therapists. I think they're needed in certain situations, but I found it difficult for me to be able to talk to a therapist about something that happened to me that they have never experienced. Being able to talk to Alvaro, being able to talk to other burn survivors when they've actually know what it's like to have your burn scrubbed in a tank room, or what it's like to go to occupational and physical therapy, what it's like to get those stairs. That to me was the best therapy that we would, you know, I think we were able to kind of give. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that we had to go through this together. I don't know how difficult it would have been for either of us if we would have had to do this by ourselves.
I totally understand that. I totally understand that going through something that somebody else has experienced is it's a completely different experience from therapy, and they both have their ability to help you process your feelings, but there's something about a shared experience that really, I think, helps tie people together and lead to healing. So I've taken up a little bit more than an hour of your time. But before I go, I wanted to ask if there's anything that the two of you want to say or want to make sure that we include in this episode that we haven't covered.
Our goal is always to just share enough information to help young adults to not only about fire safety, it's just to overcome tough obstacles in their life, because we're all going to go through struggles and difficult time. And just to teach them that all we need sometimes is patience and faith to get through tough times, because sometimes we want instant gratification. We live the microwave era where we want things to happen overnight, but life is not like that, especially with injuries or tough times. It takes time and patience to get through these difficult times.
I just want to let people know that, you know, we're very passionate about our advocacy. Like, we continue to this day to go and speak on college campuses and high schools about our story. And there's a lot more places that we want to get to. You know, we want to get to as many young adults as possible. So please reach out. We're on Instagram. We have a huge following on our Instagram page where we actually post a lot of the places that we're either going or that we're coming from. We try to every once in a while post some fire safety and prevention tips on our page. You know, we just want to be able to be a resource for colleges. There's still a lot of fires that happen on college campuses, which is unfortunate. Luckily, the last couple of years, there have not been any fatalities due to fires on college campuses, but 100% of all college campus dormitories are still not sprinkled, which is something that was huge that came from our tragedy at Seton Hall. And to me, that's scary, because that means there's the opportunity for a fire to happen in one of those dormitories where there's a possibility where life can be lost. But we also don't just focus on fire safety on college campuses. We talk about fire safety in off-campus housing or in your personal apartments. We talk about the Station nightclub fire. Every kid that we sit to and speak at an audience is going to end up in a bar or a club at some point in time, maybe in a seedy city somewhere, and they can't move around because there's too many people in the club. And if something happens, do they know how to get out of there? So like, we try to bring all these different aspects of not just what happened to us at Seton Hall, but other emergency type situations to them, just to kind of say, hey, think outside the box. Think about when you're going into that first apartment, you know, maybe not trying to get the cheapest apartment because Miss Susie is renting out her basement or her attic because she wants to make some extra money, but it's not two ways to get out of that place. So little things like that, we want to be able to be of a resource to local fire departments and to schools to say, hey, hear the story from what these guys have gone through and listen to the tips that they have to provide for you. Hopefully you will never have to use any of those tips, but it will always be in the back of your head just in case.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your time with us so generously. I will be sure to put, for anyone that wants to reach out to you, I will put links to your Instagram and your website in the show notes so people know how they can find you. There is a contact form right on Shawn and Alvaro's website in case you want to reach out and see if you can book them for your organization or event. Having listened to them speak at an event, I can say it's an exceptionally powerful experience. In fact, it's been a year since I first heard you, and I just went back to the same event where I got to hear you, and it was still a topic of conversation a year later, how powerful your presentation was. So thank you so much for sharing your advocacy with us. Thank you for sharing this very personal story of healing, and we are very grateful to be able to help promote your work to really bring a focus to fire safety, and especially campus fire safety, because like you said, it is still an issue. And I think last time I looked, there's only 5 states that require all student housing to have fire sprinklers. And we talked about it in our episode. It's a balancing act, right? Because it's expensive to retrofit. But incoming students going to live in a dormitory need to understand the risks. They need to understand how important it is to pay attention to every fire alarm, and they need to understand that bad things do happen, and you have to have the escape plan, and you have to know what you're going to do and have that muscle memory of which direction you turn when you come out of your room to get to the closest exit, or if that exit's blocked off, where's the next one? Or even learning to count doors as you touch them as you go down the hall, because like you said, it's not like you see in the movies. It is pitch black inside a fire. And even when I was in the fire department, we did all of our training for search and rescue with our masks blacked out, because they knew that in a real fire, we likely wouldn't be able to see, and we had to be able to do search and rescue by feel alone. And most people just don't realize how disorienting it really is. And so I always tell people, when you're in a hotel, dormitory, count how many doors are between you and the exit and keep one hand on the wall so you don't end up making a wrong turn somewhere. So thank you so much, guys. And I'm really excited and very grateful to have both of you on. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Thanks for spending time with us, man. It was really great to get to know you guys a little bit better. I saw the documentary, and I thought you guys were harsh and awesome and tough, and I still think that. I have a lot of respect for you guys, man. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And thank you guys for what you do.
It was fantastic to meet you guys. Thank you again for spending time with us, man.
No problem. Thank you guys. This was excellent.
Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved.